And this is something I want to tell you about Caesar. Like, he's often portrayed, like there's a Netflix documentary about him. If you read about him when he's portrayed in historical fiction, he's often portrayed as a kind of noble figure. And the primary sources really don't back that up. He's very smart. He's very clever. He's got this sense of self-preservation, and he certainly has a high sense of himself and a desire for prestige. Ethical, he is not. And the other thing about his early career is he goes into debt, and he will sell himself happily for power. There was even a rumor, I hesitate to mention it, but it's worth mentioning maybe. There is even a rumor that when he was very young, in order to get in the good graces of the king of Bithynia, who was a very wealthy Roman ally, that he actually he kind of prostituted himself to this king. Again, who knows if that was true? That might be a rumor that was started later to kind of damage Caesar's credibility. But the idea of kind of loaning himself out, at least monetarily, would have been very, very aligns with what we read in the sources. Caesar was in such bad debt by the end of his praetorship that his creditors lodged a lawsuit to prevent him from taking his consular province, which, by the way, was Spain, which is very lucrative, right? Caesar wants to go to Spain because he's going to be able to, again, make some wars, get some slaves, steal some stuff, and he's going to be able to pay back some of his debts. But the debtors want their money now. And Caesar has probably been running from those debtors for some time. And so they want to collect on those debt. The thing that enables Caesar to get out of this situation is actually this guy right here, this kind of wrinkly-looking guy. This is Crassus, right? This is Crassus right here. So Crassus steps in and allows and basically pays off Julius Caesar's debt. There's a huge influx of money into Julius Caesar's campaign. In the McDonald's photo, I put Crassus's image over Elon, right? Of course, right? Kind of fitting. So Crassus comes in with big money, right? Big support, and helps Caesar at this moment when he is in big trouble. And what this means is that Caesar can now go to Spain, he can provoke those wars, he can capture those slaves, and he can start to pay down at least some of his debts. Now, he's now obviously in obligation to Crassus. That is one thing that he does have to deal with. There are some other reasons, though, why does Crassus support Caesar? Like, what, does he just do it out of the goodness of his heart? No. Crassus is a businessman. Crassus thinks that he can use Caesar for his own benefit. And one of the things that Crassus is going to want from Caesar is a returned favor. Crassus has numerous contracts with publicani. Do you guys remember, can somebody tell me one of the things that publicani tend to do in Rome's provinces? Does anybody remember one of the things that they tend to be responsible for? Yeah. Tax collecting, okay? And the process for this is pretty exploitative, right? The publicani bid, different groups of publicani bid in the city of Rome. They say, look, I can collect this many, I can collect this many, right? And whoever gets the highest bid gets the right to collect taxes. So the publicani over in Asia Minor put out a huge number, right, to get the contract for Asia Minor. They go to that, and these guys are partnered with Crassus. Crassus is invested in their, he can't do it directly because he's a senator, right? He can't himself go and collect taxes. That would be, socially kind of, incorrect. It would be a bit of a stigma. It would be taboo for him to do that. So instead, he's got an alliance with some publicani, and then he kind of gets some money on the back end. So he's invested in what these guys are doing, and they overbid. They actually can't collect the taxes necessary to even meet the amount that they agreed to pay to the Roman state, let alone gain a profit. So this is a super bad deal for the publicani, and it's a bad deal for Crassus as well. And he asks the Senate, Crassus says, hey, look, I need you guys to give me a bailout. I need you guys, right? If some things don't change, right? He needs the Senate to just, basically socialize his losses, right? If he makes money, those are privatized. If he has losses, they're socialized. That's what he wants. Now the Senate are like, no, we're not going to do that. They're all rivals. They are not going to bail out Crassus. So Crassus, and in fact, the big guy that blocks, and this is not Cato's picture, I'm just writing it over here. The big guy that blocks it is Cato, right? Cato, this ultra-conservative, who really does, at this point, does not like any of these three guys. Cato is not a fan. So Cato blocks the Senate from approving and is sort of leading the faction against getting this bailout for his publicani. So Crassus needs Caesar to do something about it. Well, fortunately, Caesar returns from Spain, again, a wealthy man, a very popular man, and he is going to run for the consulship. So he's had a 2-year break. He can run for the consulship now, based on the way that the current laws work in the city of Rome. So Caesar announces that he is going to run as a candidate for the consulship. The Senate, because of Caesar's exploits over a foreign power, also votes to give Caesar a triumph. Okay, this is Caesar right here, by the way. So they're going to give Caesar a triumphal parade. Now, here is the problem. Caesar wants to run for consulship. He also wants to have his triumph. But if he goes into the city, right, to run for the consulship, because he has to physically go and stand, right, he has to present himself physically to the centuriate committee to run for the consulship. If he's going to do that, he forgoes his triumph because his power, his command power, goes away. He goes into Rome. He becomes a civilian again. He's a private citizen again. He's no longer a general. He does not have command over his army. So he can't actually have the triumph. And folks like Cato in the Senate, who really want Caesar to suffer because he's gradually gaining in popularity, want Caesar humiliated. Caesar asks the Senate if he can run for the consulship in absentia, right, which is the opportunity to run without being there. This is something that is rare, right, to be able to run in absentia. There has been one other person that we have talked about that has been able to do this. Does anybody remember who this was? Who was able to run for consulship in absentia? Do folks remember who it was? Good guess. Not quite. Close. Marius. Marius was allowed to run in absentia. So it wouldn't be completely without precedent for him to be able to do this. But the Senate, again, blocked this. Cato leads the way. No, we're not letting Caesar run in absentia. He has to pick. Ha, ha, ha. You either get a triumph and you can't run for the consulship, or you can run for the consulship without the triumph. At this point, right, Caesar is going to have to decide what it is that he is going to do. They think, knowing Caesar, that he is going to pick prestige, right? That this will stop Caesar from running for consul. Because he will pick prestige. He cares more about his prestige and his reputation. We just saw he divorced his wife, right? That's what he's going to pick. Actually, instead, Caesar decides to forego his triumph. And he walks into the city of Rome. His command falls off of him. His imperium falls off of him as he walks into the city. His soldiers, who would have loved to have triumphed, Caesar would have been dressed up as a god. It would have been the most prestigious thing that he could have ever done. He lets it go so that he can run for the consulship physically. And that's what he does. He plays their game. He wins the election. Now, as punishment, right, which is the Senate does not expect this. And so what they still have control over is which province he gets. And so what they do for Julius Caesar is, instead of giving him Macedonia or Spain or Africa or one of these, or one of the new Asia Minor provinces, which have got plenty of loot to exploit, they give him a province that really had never been given before, which is care of the roads and forests and waterways of Italy. It's it's like a park ranger, right? They're just like, I'm not, being a park ranger is probably, I think it's a great job. I'm not trying to demean it. But if your comparison, right, is to go over and, loot a territory and fight wars and all of that with legions, being a park ranger is less exciting, perhaps, than that. And that's what Caesar is given, right? This is an insult to Caesar, right? And that's the point. That's the point. And I want you to see this, too. Caesar cares about prestige, and the Senate go after him on that. And this could be part of an answer to that essay question, right? Are there ways to give Caesar prestige without maybe giving him power? Although in this case, Caesar picked power rather than prestige. So Caesar is given just this joke of a province. So Pompey and Crassus ally with Julius Caesar. Crassus, like I said, for purposes of securing this bailout, that is very much what he wants. Pompey, you can imagine what he wants if you remember what we talked about a week ago from today. Pompey has gone all the way over to the east. He has made a bunch of new provinces. He has secured a bunch of new alliances. He had promised client kingdoms to kings, which he was paid for. And obviously the Roman state gets some of that money too. He had promised his veterans land, right? So all of these things Pompey had said that he would do. And if you remember, right, he goes back to the Senate and he's like, okay, I'll put my army down. I lay my army down. Will you go ahead and do these things? And they're like, no, right? We're not going to do any of those things. And Pompey needs somebody to help him with those things. Like his veterans are itching, like they have not been rewarded like he promised. And so Caesar, right, hopefully will do that. And this is partly how Caesar is able to win the consulship. Crassus's money and then Pompey's angry veterans who go into the forum and intimidate voters, and in some cases maybe even have engaged in violence to prevent the voters of opposing candidates from actually voting, because you have to vote, you have to physically vote there. And so between violence and money, he is able to win. Again, Pompey and Crassus are the ones that help him out. These three guys had made this pact informally. It was somewhat secret, and we call it, the First Triumvirate. I call it the Triumvirate here. It will become the First Triumvirate because there will be a second Triumvirate that we'll talk about in 2 weeks when we get back from Thanksgiving.
Did you get something out of that video? Did you learn a little more about Roman history? If you did, would you click that like button? It's a small thing that you can do that really helps grow the channel. Maybe you have a question about something we talked about, or I didn't talk about something and you want to share a comment. Maybe you know something a little bit more about the topic. Would you write that question or comment in the comments of this video? I read all of them. Sometimes I learn things. I answer questions in the comments, and other people read those comments as well. So what you write in the comments might be useful for another person that views this video. And finally, if you want to keep up with the channel, why don't you click that subscribe button? That way you'll get videos every time I upload them. If you'd like to go a little bit further and deeper into the history of ancient Rome, I have a podcast. It's called the Pax Romana Podcast. P-A-X, Pax Romana Podcast. It's available anywhere. They're about 20-minute episodes, one released every week. We start with the big history of Rome, starting with the death of Julius Caesar, and then going as far as we can go. There are some big highlights during that period. Obviously, things like the reign of Nero and the Great Fire, the birth of the empire under Augustus, the reign of Marcus Aurelius, Rome's Stoic emperor, also the rise of the church, the crisis of the 3rd century. You're welcome to start with episode 1, and you can just listen to that podcast like it's an audiobook, basically, in little 20-minute chapters. Or maybe you want to dip in particular episodes. You can just look through the back catalog and find what you like. Or maybe you've got a friend or a relative that's really interested in some particular aspect of Roman history and wants to learn about it in a quick 20-minute chunk. Why don't you send them a link to one of the episodes of the Pax Romana podcast? Thanks a bunch for checking out the podcast. Thanks for watching this video. Take care.